Well, thank you everybody for taking the time to join us today for today's webinar. I'm really excited to get into today's content. If our dry run was any indication, this is going to be a great discussion today. Obviously, we know OKRs are simple, but they are not easy, and Gracie is here today to tell us 3 reasons why. Before I introduce Gracie, I want to get through just a couple housekeeping items. First, welcome and thank you for joining. My name is Corey Hartland, Director of Enablement here with the Gtmhub Alliances team, and we greatly appreciate everyone for joining us. The webinar will be recorded, so we'll be sending out a follow-up email, probably Monday or Tuesday, with your link to the webinar recording. And we're also looking forward to your questions. So as you can see at the bottom of the webinar, we do have a Q&A section. Feel free to drop your questions in that module, and we'll be happy to answer them when the time comes. Without any further ado, I want to introduce today's speaker. Gracie Kester is the lead consultant and director of new business for Agile Strategies, one of our premier partners here at Gtmhub. Gracie brings over a decade of experience consulting in the realms of strategy, leadership, and team performance to her role as an OKR coach. She is a business geographer dedicated to helping individuals, organizations, and communities generate greater impact and reward. Trained to see in layers and interconnections, she has a knack for making the complex simple. She works individually and system-wide to connect dots, uncovering new insights and pathways to success. Without further ado, Gracie, welcome to today's webinar.
Thank you so much, Corey. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about what it takes to have success with OKRs. So I'm going to take a moment to get my screen share going, and then we'll kick off.
Perfect.
All right. I think you got my screen title here.
I do.
All right. Great. Well, really looking forward to this collaboration, Corey, and I've enjoyed our conversations leading up to this. So I want to start by painting a picture of why OKRs, right? People get interested in OKRs for so many different outcomes, but by and large, I think it comes down to having kind of the Marie Kondo of strategy, something that's clean and clear and organized. You know easily what's important, and you have a lean ability to make your next move. Right? But so often, our strategy actually looks a little bit more like this, right? And so not only do you have your strategy, but maybe your strategic pillars also. And then you throw in your BHAGs, your KPIs, your strategic imperatives, round that out with some big rocks with SMART goals, key initiatives, and also don't forget your priorities.
You can easily see how it's hard to lose focus.
Hard to lose focus. Easy to lose focus.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it makes it really hard for anyone in the organization to have clarity on what they should be doing. So no wonder they have to feed decisions up the food chain and then back down, wasting a lot of time and resource because it's really not clear what actually is the important thing. I love the history of the word priorities also, because that word used to not have a plural. It was an oxymoron to have more than one priority. Priority by default was the one important thing.
Yeah, it always makes it hard when you've got 4 or 5 priorities and which one is number one, right?
Exactly. And so I think that this problem actually gets worse the farther you go down through an organization. And what that amounts to for any organization is then you move a whole lot slower, right? You've got this really heavy, clunky suitcase you're dragging with you rather than something nimble that can adjust on the fly.
Ends up making your decision, almost your decision tree ends up having a long tail, which really slows down any movement, right?
Exactly. And makes it harder when you might need to make an adjustment, then where does it get piled in, right? And so if you're a for-profit company, I think the end result is that your competition eats your lunch. And if you're a nonprofit, you probably are experiencing that the problems are getting worse before you can even make a dent.
Yeah.
Right. So the imperative, and really from my perspective and our perspective here at Agile Strategies, the why behind OKRs is to enable strategic agility. Right. This is why you come to OKRs. And this is having that muscle to sense and respond to what's going on in your environment and keep a relentless focus on generating value for your stakeholders.
Well, I think that's something so important because so many of our consultants say, "Hey, we do all this amazing work." I even had a talk with a gentleman this week who made a perfect analogy. He went, "We do all this work on this great document, this great strategy document that we give to people and tells them all the things they should do.
Mhm.
Doesn't tell them how to do it." And then OKRs become that way to execute really anything you want to accomplish inside of your organization.
Right. It's that bridge from strategy to execution. Right. And I think when you see a finished set of OKRs, they make so much sense that it seems like it must be easy to get there because they're so obvious, right? When you hit on them, it's like, oh yeah, right. But getting there, it's kind of like cleaning your closet, right? Before you get that beautiful Marie Kondo organization, everything comes out and is dumped on the floor, and you have to select and make some choices, and then you can have the important few
Yep.
come to
And it
life.
takes a while to build those muscles,
Mm-hmm.
just like
Because
it takes a while to clean up that closet.
right. All right. And so when we see organizations embarking on OKRs, we see a handful of challenges that can waylay. So one is overload, right? Having way too many OKRs, having, and sometimes this is really about also going too far, too fast. One of the things that we promote is going slow to go fast, right? Not saying, well, everyone needs to do OKRs right at the outset, but um, but
Or
really
even
being
start
slow.
with team level, right? We hear that a lot from a starting perspective of start with team level
Mm-hmm.
OKRs for the first quarter or two, and then start to work down through the team into individuals.
Yeah. Yeah. We see another obstacle with really lacking true buy-in, right? People will say, well, I developed my OKRs, but the team's not fully committed, right? That maybe it's still that there's OKRs and everything else. So what do we prioritize, or, not being involved in actually deciding on what gets selected can decrease commitment to goals. We
That's
see
right.
that.
And then also the buy-in. Sometimes the buy-in isn't even vertical, it's horizontal, right?
Right.
Sometimes when you design OKRs, it really kind of points out the interconnectedness of your organization and the need to cross-team collaborate. But if other teams and departments aren't bought into that structure, it can make hard getting lift off of the program.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so you can kind of see the effects of siloed thinking, right? Where it's like me against them rather than we're all in the same boat together.
That's right.
And another obstacle I see, Corey, is OKRs just looking like long to-do lists, right? Everything that you need to accomplish or check off shows up in an OKR. And again, that leads to a lot of bulk and confusion.
Well, I think that's the hardest thing when you're starting to build those OKR muscles is trying to figure out, okay, what is really important? Because when you start to think in 3-month chunks, you can put some high level key results in that actually require a whole pile of tasks to get done, as opposed to going straight to that big long list, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can see how I think it can be a great tool for really from there assessing capacity,
Yeah,
right? So if this is the big thing I'm supposed to do, then here's all of the other things I think need to happen. And do we actually have the capacity as a team to tackle all those tasks in order to achieve the result?
that's right. And who needs to help me?
And who needs to help? So to frame this differently, here's the 3 ingredients that we see are necessary for success for OKRs. That focus, that really shining the light on the few important things, the alignment, the full buy-in and commitment from the team, from colleagues, and then getting measurability, right? Not just having a whole list of things to check off, but really what amounts to a quantifiable change in value for one of your stakeholders. So I want to look at each of these 3 in turn. So let's start with focus. And I want to frame this up with a quote from Michael Porter, whose guidance around strategy has seemed to really stand the test of multiple decades. And here he's emphasizing that the key to good strategy, the key to strategic agility, is being able to say no. And I see so often individuals and teams don't feel empowered to say no. I think part of that is from that confusion of having so many priorities and BHAGs and strategic initiatives that it's really unclear what thing actually is going to move the needle the most.
And it's hard to decide, right? Especially when you're starting to switch from one way of doing work to OKRs. Once again, building those muscles and consistency, and then being able to really learn how to protect your time so that you know how to be able to achieve the most value for the organization. And that's not an easy change management thing to do either, is it?
Right. And I think what you see here in absence of this is feeling like decisions have to be made at the top because there just isn't the focus given so that people all through the organization can make those decisions without sign off.
Well, that's kind of one of the beautiful side benefits of OKRs, right? This concept of empowerment. People are empowered to make more decisions and to be able to push a little bit more, to be able to drive certain things forward to create that more business value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it really dignifies the smarts that live within our teams to be able to do that, to say, this is clear. If we point the direction, you're smart. You can help us figure out how to get there, right? We don't have to micromanage or detail out everything, right? Because we hire smart people.
Yeah. Well, and it's also the beauty of doing it quarterly. So when if you know your team is hitting your KRs and you're not seeing the data model move on your objective, you know it's time to switch up your strategy and tactics.
Exactly. Exactly. So then I think that brings us to let's take a look at how OKRs compare to typical strategic planning, right? We've already talked about how OKRs bridge that strategy to execution gap. I think one of the things that has happened in more recent years is strategic plans. It's like a nice retreat where we put a lot of brain power and a lot of hours, a lot of really expensive hours into creating a strategy document that then gathers dust on the shelf. Right. And so a couple reasons that it doesn't come to life, right? There's not a regular cadence of interacting with that strategy. And there's not that bridge to, well, that's great. That's where we're going in the next 5 or 10 years or 3 years. But what does that mean for this quarter?
Yeah. Or today. Right.
Right.
And that kind of brings up a good question that somebody in the chat posted, and it was really talking about, okay, if you're in the mid-level and your team is using it, you know, what are some of the ways that you've been successful in being able to sell OKRs up the chain to get leadership buy-in?
That's a great question. So I would get curious about the specifics in that organization from this participant, but as in a general level, I'll say that you only get buy-in and commitment when you take care of what someone else cares about or is concerned about, right? So what is that senior leader concerned about or interested in? And can OKRs help, right? OKRs are a marvelous tool. They're not going to solve every problem under the sun, but there's quite a handful of really important problems that they do help solve.
Well, I think too, if your team has been using OKRs, then the results should be able to speak for themselves. And I think one of the problems that many of us have is self-promotion, right? Being able to toot our own horn a little bit and being able to toot the horn of our team and showcase the value that our team has been able to achieve. You know, that's another great way of hopefully opening the eyes of leadership to get buy-in to advance the program.
So often we'll get a lot of reach outs from people on that spot, right? That OKRs have caught the attention of other groups because there's a team or a department that's been able to achieve a lot more than before, that's had a lot more clarity, has felt more effective, has felt more empowered. Right. And I think that's where OKRs can help. It's where a typical strategic plan, it's this long time horizon. So much gets thrown in there, right? We've got 5 years. Of course, we can get to all of that. So everything in the kitchen sink goes in. And then the world changes and the strategic plan is no longer so relevant, right? And there's not a method for continuing to refresh that, taking in new information and learning, right? And there tends to be an overemphasis on those health metrics and KPIs, which are necessary for a business, but a focus on those alone isn't what's going to help you really do highly transformative or impactful work.
Yep, agreed.
So OKRs bring in that focus, they bring in the learning and iteration. And I think our are just an exceptional tool to achieve on both the higher level of the company, the organization goals, and also have impact at the individual level in terms of feeling that meaning and contribution.
It really does help with execution. It's the one thing I've really enjoyed about adopting it. I've used other management frameworks in the past, but that's the one great thing of you have that moment and you go, what's the next thing? It's OKRs, right? I get to go in and check my OKRs, and instantly I know what's the next most important thing I need to cross off the list or start and pick up and run with.
Oh, what a good feeling. This is honestly something that when we share with clients, I think almost everyone is skeptical to begin, right? Because it feels like you have so much to do, and how could it actually fit in here? I think a couple things happen when you tease out really good OKRs. I think that you realize that what's been articulated maybe at the company level is actually, they're speaking to things that can and probably should live at the department or team level. I think it can be very freeing at an executive level to say, actually, these are the few things that we want to articulate as our vision, our outcomes, and then look at how the teams want to support that, rather than at the top being really detail oriented on exactly how that must go. So the point that I want to make with this is that you're really looking to avoid overwhelm. This is so real, right? I mean, as soon as you leave this webinar, you're going to go back to your email and have a dozen things that have come up, right? And so at their best, OKRs are used to create the clarity so that people can make decisions amidst that noise that comes in day after day.
Yes. I know they've helped me a great deal.
So I think the imperative that I want to leave with as we talk about focus, right, is the imperative to prioritize ruthlessly. And doing that hard work at the beginning actually saves a lot of extra pain, I believe.
Yep. Agreed. We talked about that in our dry run, right? We were talking about, when you first started, it's like building that muscle, right? And you do have to spend a little bit more time in the gym to build that muscle than you do to maintain it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when people start OKRs, they get a little bit flustered because it does take a little bit while to train that muscle to get it working well. But then after you do 2 or 3, 4 quarters, then all of a sudden that muscle is trained up and you're ready to go. And it takes less and less time as you advance through your OKR maturity.
So true. And I feel like so many people give up in that early stage, not knowing that they're just so close to getting around that bend and having that strength.
Well, that's another reason why I love working with partners like yourself, right? Because when we think about failing fast, right? Of course, that's another business buzzword. Everybody wants to do this thing called fail fast, right? See if it's going to work. And if not, you move on and you do the next thing. But so many people want to take a look at OKRs in that same fashion, right? And it's saying, well, we want to do this as a trial. We want to do this as a short-term pilot for this team. Well, back to that whole building muscle analogy, right? Well, I wouldn't put myself up against Roger Federer. I haven't built any muscles to be able to compete in that space. So I've always loved the way Agile Strategies and other of our partners take a look at the concept of a trial. And it's very Yoda-esque, isn't it? It's there's, you either do or not do OKRs. There is no try, right? Because it is going to take a while. So if you're going to do it on a short-term basis, you're right. It probably won't be as successful as you had hoped because nobody's built that OKR muscle memory yet to really build it and ingrain it into the culture of your organization to then see those OKR superpowers start to trickle out of your team as they progress quarter over quarter.
Yeah. Well, let's talk next a little bit about alignment, right? And this is something I hear a lot, right? We want our teams to be aligned, and it can mean various things. But first and foremost, let's just state the obvious here that OKRs require agreement, right? If these rowers in the boat don't all agree what they're doing and where they're going, they tip the ship, to be honest. if any of you out there have ever rowed in one of these boats, it is a delicate balance, right? And so you have to ensure that you have actual agreement, not just lip service.
Very true.
That requires different leadership skills than what we have historically, right? We're not in those days where leaders bark out orders, know it all, are the only smart one in the room.
That's right.
So assuming you hire smart people, if you don't hire smart people, then maybe this doesn't apply to you. But assuming you hire smart people, right, you want to get insights and input from your whole team.
That's right.
Right.
And not just the whole team. I know when we were talking about the dry run, and we were talking about these new leadership skills and sort of that ability to break down the silos or build better walkways between the silos so that there is a way to be able to get horizontal alignment. So that whole new leadership style really is about forging relationships horizontally across the organization.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the.
Yeah. I also think that this relies on it. It fights against this tendency for a team leader to say, but I know what our goals should be. And I can get it. I can do our OKRs faster if I just do them myself.
Yep.
And what you miss there is that to have actual alignment, you do need to put in the time and have that participation and come with curiosity and to say, even if you have some ideas, to say, well, what does everyone else think? And maybe there's something you hadn't thought of or you've forgotten. Or if you and your team have really different ideas, also very, very valuable to know.
Well, even from the employee perspective, right? When we think about adopting OKRs, right? We know when they come from the top down with no bottom up input and feedback, then once again, it can feel like OKRs are a way of telling me what to do as opposed to me helping guide you on the things that I think I should be doing to impact, my role in the organization. And with alignment, this comes back to a question somebody just asked in the chat. When you are aligning over multiple layers, 4 or more, I know that can also be a challenge. So, have you ever aligned OKRs over 4 or more levels? And is there any advice you could help give people when it comes to alignment over multi-level organizations?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And one of the things that we talk about with OKRs is having both top down and bottom up alignment, right? And it sounds great. And then how do you actually do it? Right. And so I think that there has to be questions to align across 4 layers of an organization. You need to be asking the question of who goes first, right? Who sets OKRs first? Are they starting from the bottom first? Are they starting from the top first? Is there some sort of combination, right? And that's what can feel harder at first, right? To get back to that muscle building, right? You can say, well, how does this make sense in our organization? So one of the things too, if you're looking at 3 or more layers, I think it's important to not think of OKRs necessarily as strict bands that follow these rows of the org chart, right? If I need to do something important with someone else, I don't care if they're also at the VP level, right? If they're a director, if they're C-level, it shouldn't matter if that's who needs to be in their room and doing the work to accomplish the most important thing. And so how that looks in an organization of 4 or more layers, we can help you figure it out. There's some best practices, and then there's some tailoring that has to happen depending on what's true in your organization. And I think that really brings me to this point, is that we've set up org charts in this way that, is the same way the church is set up. It's the same way the military is organized. But we need to actually operate like an organism. Right? We're a network, not a hierarchy. And so the high performance speaks to the need to have a healthy network where you're conversing, where you're making and managing commitments well. And only with that are you going to actually have OKR success.
Well, even back into the organism analogy, one of the questions that this came in really plays into that too. And it's, can OKRs work if the whole org doesn't adopt them and only small pockets do?
Oh, so I like a big question. They can actually. You're not going to get as broad of benefits. But one of the things I love about OKRs is that you can talk about them without calling them OKRs. Right? I can say, hey, Corey, I'm trying to achieve this vision of having the best web presence of any OKR consultancy. And I want to measure success by how many webinars I do this quarter. Could you help me?
Yeah.
Right? I've just spoken to an OKR that I might have, but I didn't have to say, hey, Corey, I'm doing OKRs. Will you do OKRs with me?
Yeah.
And so yes, and we see a lot of organizations start this way, right? They're one group that works with OKRs, and that group is seeing more benefits, and then it starts to catch the eye of other groups.
Well, yeah. As soon as it shows up on paper, it's a holy cow! Look at this team, right? And how did you guys do that? And then all of a sudden, the topic of OKRs comes up, and lo and behold, it starts to sprout and grow in other pockets.
Mm-hmm. So I'd also like to say that OKRs are really great for pointing you towards the conversations you need to have, but they just can't have the conversation for you. You've still got to do that part, but hopefully it makes it more clear what conversations to prioritize. Because we all have a lot to do. So I want to make a point here that assuming a 40-hour work week, one person is working 480 hours a quarter. Is it worth 4 hours to align in order to make those 480, the 476 other hours more effective?
Yeah.
Right. And OKR retro and reset takes less than 1% of your time in a quarter. And so if you make those conversations a habit, right? If you make it a habit to have the conversation to focus and then align and prioritize, you're going to drive so much power. So then, Corey, we have our third ingredient left to talk about. We have measurability. I love this one because it's one of the most fun things that I get to do as an OKR consultant, right? Help people make sense of everything they have to do and turn it into measurable goals. And our work, all of us, I have a to-do list right here, right? Like we all do. Our work is made up of getting things done and checked off of our list. But OKRs ask you to recognize that that output is not the same as an outcome. And I have some theories. If I get some of this stuff done on my list, what's going to happen as a result? What will be different? What will be the reality I live in, or the success I achieve?
That's a good way to look at it.
Right.
Well, I think too, when you're crafting your KRs and you're trying to figure out those measurables, sometimes one of the hardest things to do is knowing that this is the way I should be measured, and then trying to figure out how you're going to be able to measure it in the systems you have control over. Is there an object on a field somewhere that I can measure this? Because I think this is the best thing I should measure, but how am I going to achieve that measurement to make sure it's easy for me to check those numbers on a regular basis and update?
Right. And I think that's the point where you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yes.
Right. There might be an ideal thing to measure, but getting that data is going to be a mountain of work, take a long time. And if there's something else you can measure in proxy, that can work just as well. And sometimes even just baselining something can be a powerful driver of change.
Yep.
Like right. Just saying, hey, we want to put a focus on this, and we don't even know what our starting point is yet, but we just know that we need to do something in this area.
Great.
So this visual, as a geographer, I really love, right? Putting this in a spatial relationship, right? You see the foundation is still getting tasks and projects done. But OKRs are asking you to measure the effectiveness of that and then learn from it, right? And so this gets into a whole conversation that we should have another time, Corey, about how OKRs do and do not intersect with performance management. But
That's right.
suffice it to say here, what OKRs at their best do is they help you do disciplined experimentation, which means they help you learn, right? If you think that all of these tasks and projects are the most important things to do and they're going to get you these results, and then they don't, well, isn't that interesting, right? What were we missing? What can we get curious about and change if we're not actually getting the results from how we're spending our 476 hours a quarter?
That's right. That's right. That's the one of the things that, I'm a visual guy as well. So I always love a good analogy and a picture. And the one thing that I've seen, coming from, startups and social media and digital and spending time at Salesforce and Sprinkler and starting to really understand these digital social CRM ecosystems was that I saw most companies saying, okay, we're going to acquire 400 or 500 different pieces of technology to do this thing called digital transformation. We kind of have an idea of what goals and where we want to go, but nobody's really taught your employees how to use those 400 or 500 pieces of technology effectively to then move across the board. So then OKRs become your map.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the map you want to get to. Your objective is your North Star. We know that we want to take our employees and move them across this board. OKRs become your map, and some of the tooling and the measurement is now going to help you chart the most efficient path across that map to get to your goals and objectives.
Right. And to be able to change tactics along the way, right? Like if you can outline that North Star, you can say, well, actually, I'm not sure that Project C is getting as much impact as we were hoping for. Let's let that go so that we can put our valuable resources to something else. Right. And it's such an important skill, right? It gets to that sunk cost fallacy within the capital A Agile movement, right? Just because you've started something doesn't mean it actually is the best idea to continue.
That's right. That's right.
And if you put the completing the project as your key result, if you erroneously make that task a key result, then you're more likely going to wedge yourself to that task, or go, oh, well, our OKRs aren't relevant. Let's set them aside and then go back to just fielding fly balls from left and right.
Well, this is a good one from the audience too, when it comes to, now I think, we're kind of into it. We're trying to measure, we're updating. I'm an employee. How often should employees update their OKRs towards their quarterly goals? And then what are some of the best practices leveraging OKRs with a one-on-one with the boss?
Good questions. So I love this because one of the saddest things that can happen is that you can spend the time to make these great OKRs that are capturing the impacts, not the tasks. And then you don't actually talk about them, right? That talking about them regularly is how you're going to have a heads up if something doesn't look like it's working like you thought. So we say weekly. We say an OKR check-in can and really probably should be under 30 minutes for a team. And so we got our clients in a really crisp structure for doing that. And if you have a tool like Gtmhub, it goes a long way because you can do more of that work asynchronously, right? One of the things I think is so irksome for so many employees is the status report meetings. One of our CEOs, I love it, he calls it the show up and throw up meeting. And I think we tend to be smart enough that we can read those line items ahead of time. Let's use that valuable in-person time to look at, where are we encountering challenges? Do we need to make some changes? And so I think that's really a key part is that weekly check-in, which I think can feel like a lot when you feel like we already have so many meetings. My recommendation is that your OKR meeting isn't an additional separate meeting, right? It is the agenda for your team meeting.
And I think that's a really, really important thing to talk about, because in that meeting, it's not about what did we do? It's about, I'm trying to get to this place. Here's what I need to get there. Who can help? Mm-hmm. Right. I think that's a good distinction.
Yes.
So many meetings we want to go and just talk about the things we got done. as
Mhm.
opposed to what are the things we wanted to get done and we need a little bit of help crossing that line, right?
That's such a great point, Corey. It's so true. And to really dignify that we all do need some of that help sometimes. Things don't go according to plan, right? And so rather than me needing to kind of hide what's not working and, kind of put up a nice facade, can we actually have a real discussion around what isn't happening like we thought it might?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So I want to talk briefly about how do you go from, how do you build that muscle of going from, well, here's my to-do list items. How do I get to a key result? So one of our tricks is to pretend you have a toddler next to you, which some of you working from home probably do, right? And get into that mindset of just asking why until you get to the heart of the matter. Right. So if on my to-do list is, hey, I need to train all the staff. Why? Well, funny you should ask. We need to improve our project management capacity. All right. So why, what's going on there? How might we measure success? Well, I would see success as increasing our project capacity by 50%, right? We want to be able to have more things in features in flight. I'm like, is that really better though? Why do we want more in flight at once? Or is that really the best hack? Right. And asking why there might get you to the fact that you're actually looking at velocity. Right. We want to be able to roll out features twice as fast. Okay, great.
Getting closer.
Getting closer. And finally, that might be about actually increasing customer retention. So I want to use this visual to actually make another point about key results. Right? Increasing customer retention might be a key result that lives, say, for example, at the company level, maybe annually, right? And so then if I'm a team that might support that, I don't just break that down to say, okay, well, if we want to increase customer retention to 90%, I'll do a quarter of that this quarter. Right? I might say this quarter, there's something else I want to achieve in service of that, right? Which might be, hey, I want to see our velocity increase.
Or decrease one-time resolutions from your call center, decrease average case resolution times, increase CSAT, all kinds of ways that you could support those kinds of initiatives, right?
Yes, exactly. So the last point I want to make here on measurability is to measure what you treasure, right? To put it there, even if it's imperfect, because you're sending a message with your OKRs about what you care about. And so putting those things in there is so important. And I see this actually come up quite a bit with people related OKRs. I don't know about you, Corey, but I think I would say across the board, the hardest things to measure have to do with how people are thinking, feeling, and behaving. And so often that's we need to see, right, what we're looking for with culture. And you can get at that with surveys, but you can only survey so much within an organization before you decrease participation and efficacy of surveys. Right. And so we'll see a lot of teams shy away. We'll say, well, we want to make these important changes to, how our team's feeling and doing, but it's too hard to measure. So let's forget it.
Yep.
And I think you missed a really important opportunity there to speak to what you care about, even if you can't measure it perfectly.
That's actually a really good point. I know sometimes I've been put in those situations where I really wanted to measure something, but I had to work a little bit harder to make sure I could measure it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I couldn't get close, it was, well, I'm going to assume that this happened. If one of my measure was something like the number of meetings had from our partners with our customers or prospects, right? Am I going to be able to sit on every meeting? No. Is the CRM going to be documented completely accurately that allows me to do that? Maybe not. But I know on each lead object, I have the ability just to be able to tag a partner. So I know that if at least a partner was tagged, I can assume with a high degree of accuracy that somebody talked to them, right? If they've put their hand in the air and said, I want to talk to these people and get them introduced to my client, I could at least assume that if they hit that button, I can assume with a high degree of accuracy that a meeting with our partner took place.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be perfect to be effective. So just to recap where we've been, we've talked about these three elements, right? Which are some of the things we see people feel initially daunted by or challenged by. But these are the three muscles that you build, and you can actually build them pretty quickly, which is one of the exciting things, right? We do really, I think that there's something in this formula that we humans really take to.
Yep.
And then I just want to end with a reminder that it is a journey, right? You probably will never be perfect. I want to put ourselves, we're the OKR consultants, we're supposedly the experts. That doesn't mean we always set perfect key results for ourselves and achieve 100% of them, right? We learn all the time. There's erroneous assumptions that we have made that have led to key results that by the end of the quarter, we laugh. We're like, what were we thinking 3 months ago? Right.
Yeah.
And that's part of the journey too.
It always is, especially when you're trying to figure out the measurements, right? And then you get halfway through the quarter, right? And then you look at that and go, geez, what was I doing that day to think I was going to be able to come close to that number? I probably should have maybe, talked to one of my counterparts in marketing to talk about response rates, because if I put a response rate of 7%, knowing that response rates are below 1%, then that my measure was just a little too aspirational.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I even know from doing it, when you write your first set of OKRs, you need, a little bit more coaching, right? There's a little bit more hand holding there. I know when I did my second round, it got a little bit easier and I needed less coaching and I got it, pretty close, but it wasn't quite there. We had to do some adjusting. Whereas I did my Q3 and it was, these are great. Change this one thing, approved. So, oh,
yeah. I really think it is that third time's the charm, right? Yeah. When you good guidance. Otherwise, if you have that lost at sea experience with OKRs of like, you can't tell heads versus tails, reach out. Just having someone, even within your organization from a different team that's good at asking questions, that can go a long ways too, right? Like it's so helpful to get some guidance because we all can get kind of wrapped around the axle with kind of what's right in front of us, and coming up to see the bigger picture is exciting and challenging.
That is true. And Gracie, can you tell people a little bit more about Agile Strategies? I know I've enjoyed working with you and Dan and the rest of the team at Agile Strategies. I'd love to be able to hear a little bit more about, how you work with your clients and some of the services that you guys do provide and some of the process you do like to walk your clients through.
Yeah, absolutely. We work with organizations at a lot of different stages, often starting out, but also quite frequently already having embarked on OKRs. So I just kind of I can break this down in a couple of ways, right? We can help clients that are just exploring OKRs by having some introductory training or just doing some initial exploration conversations around how that might look and work within the organization. For people ready to begin, we start with basic training, and then we coach and facilitate through the first couple cycles in order to build that muscle memory, right? I think that it's so valuable to move, not just have a training, but put it into play, actually creating your own, right? I think that a training itself can only go so far. So we work with a lot of clients who are ready to implement a software at the start, and then think more broadly about their rollout a little bit later, right? Let's get the tools in, let's get the technology all in sync. And then we come in and consult and advise when they're ready to do more of a rollout. For people who already have experience with OKRs, we do a number of different things. So sometimes we're doing tune-ups, helping teams that are struggling more than others, helping roll out to further deeper into the organization or to other business units. And sometimes also some advanced advising, things like questions of, well, how do we integrate this with some of our other business practices? So our QBRs or our performance management practices, right? And so that also comes into play when we're doing broader rollout. So one of the things, especially when you get above a good size organization, you really want to have internal champions that can carry the torch forward. So I think, Corey, one of the things I'd say in some to that is that we can do some really spot treatments, but oftentimes are partnering with our clients for somewhere between 6 to 12 months and helping them be self-sufficient. So we don't have, I know consultants can have that image of, oh, we just come in and implant in your business forever, but that's actually not our business model. We want to enable our clients pretty quickly and then help more do the same.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And that really comes back to the topic of your coaches and champions internally. I know that's a question I get a lot of. Okay, we know we need people internally to be able to pick up the torch and to be able to run and carry this program forward. Can you talk a little bit about the role of that individual and what kind of character traits make a good OKR champion?
Well, I think of OKR champions in two ways, right? And we'll partner with both. I think of sometimes groups of champions where we're training an internal cadre of people that will move throughout the organization. I also think of it as kind of that one senior leader who's really, really taking the charge, leading the charge. Often that person, it's not often the CEO, but it's often someone else in the C-suite, right? So head of operations, head of HR, head of strategy, those people we're usually partnering with so that they can really carry the message. I think the reason I'm highlighting that is that it's first and foremost really important for the senior leadership to carry the message consistently as you work on that change. And then for that internal group of people that will work throughout the organization, I think it's really important that they come from multiple layers and all different departments. I think you need to clearly outline what their scope is, right? Is some of their other job responsibilities going away because they're going to do a lot with OKRs? Or is this a little thing that gets added on to their already full job description? If they're doing facilitating with teams, having people that are good question askers, that can think strategically beyond their team's purview. Those sorts of things I think are really valuable in OKR champions.
That's great. Well, I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. Anybody in our audience have any questions they would like to ask? Feel free to pop it into the Q&A as we take the next few minutes and slowly start to wrap up. We'd love to answer any remaining questions, and definitely thank everybody for being able to stay with us for a little bit this afternoon or this morning or even this evening, depending on where you're joining us from around the world. We'd be happy to answer any questions now. And so, Gracie, when I do think about moving OKR programs forward, what do you think is the challenge for adoption? Like, how often do you think that the program is poorly implemented as opposed to a technology? Because I find sometimes when things start to go down, is the strategy bad or is the tooling and adoption bad, right? How do we decide if we think we might need to fix our OKR program? How do we help disseminate, what wheel fell off and where that wheel is?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I think about where's our strategy at, and are we clear in our strategic choices, and are we able to strike a balance between being willing to pivot if needed, but not chasing every bright shiny object, right? One of the things that can derail OKRs is just feeling like changes keep coming down the pike, or we know we have a change coming, so we're not going to use OKRs yet, right? But being able to use them to help you decide on and navigate changes, I think that's one place. Then I look at also the regular cadence. Are you in a cadence of actually talking about these? Are you having the conversations you need to get and stay aligned? And then are there any other things that are inadvertently sabotaging, right? Some of the things are confusion around how OKRs may or may not relate to performance management, right? If I think I'm going to be graded 1-for-1 on my OKRs, I'm going to make really safe bets.
Yep. I think the another really good one too is some of these questions that just came in. Some good examples of bad and good OKRs. Like when you see an OKR and you go, that's good. What are some of those characteristics that sort of, I know a bad OKR is probably just something like a task, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of those good ones and characteristics that make a good OKR?
Mm-hmm. So do you want to talk specifically about, I'd like to think of it either as objectives or as key results, right? Because they're two different they're two different components that combined make a really strong engine, right? So the objective is that inspirational vision statement. And if you have that alone, it's wishful thinking. The key results are the hard measures of success. Those alone can sometimes feel hurtless, right? So putting them both together. I think one mistake I'll see people make is say, oh, well, this thing is really important, so it has to be its own OKR. Right. And that's that hierarchical thinking of saying, oh, if something is important, then it lives at the top, as if an objective is more important than a key result. But they're actually all important, as are the tasks to get there. Like, you're not going to stand any chance of achieving that OKR if there's no supporting tasks or tactics.
Right.
So I think I start there with what makes a good OKR, right? That inspiring vision statement, the measurable success as key results,
and memorable, right? I think memorable is good too, to make sure it not only sticks in your head as the person who's responsible for it, but also for your team and your management and your leadership, right? Being able to, if they can quickly remember your OKRs, then I think that's a pretty good sign too, right?
Absolutely.
I've got a couple more questions. One from the same person as a follow-up question. Are ROWE and OKR the same? What's the difference? ROWE and OKR the same? I'm not sure if you're familiar with that acronym, or I might need to clarify.
I think you need to clarify. I have a lot of acronyms in my brain, but not that one.
I bet. Well, on to the next question. When it comes to resources, right, we do have Keenan asking a questions. COO who wants to get our CEO educated on OKRs. Measure What Matters is already on that list, but ground level material. So many anecdotes are about Intel and Google, but hey, we're a small startup. Is there any other resources that you would suggest that are more, foundational for people more on the SMB side?
Oh, awesome. Well, you've kind of brought me to one of our company mottos, which is Silicon Valley for the rest of us. To be honest, we do work with some Silicon Valley companies also. But yeah, how do you translate that? It's very inspiring sometimes to hear these big stories of Bono and Google. One resource is actually the book our founder wrote that Corey alluded to. It's called Start Less, Finish More. And he says that kind of picks up where Measure What Matters leaves off, and getting more pragmatic about how to actually run an OKR program.
So I did get more information on ROWE. Stands for Results Only Work Environment. And
okay.
Created by Callie and Jody. The strategy focuses on the output of employees rather than many hours they clock in each day, making it quite the shift from the traditional workforce or workplace environment.
Yeah. So I think that those two, that philosophy really lines up with OKRs, right? So instead of thinking about how many hours a day is my butt in the seat, but what am I able to accomplish, and giving more flexibility, right? And I think that we're seeing that with some more of the remote and hybrid work environments that I think are here to stay even post-COVID. And so, yes, I do see that the thing I'd get curious about, and I just need to learn a little bit more about ROWE, and then talk to any company using that, and how you want to link OKRs with what you consider to be the individual goals. And I think that that's a really important question to spend time with, to have success with an OKR rollout.
Great. You know what? I'm going to do one more question, because I know one of the things obviously we've seen in the last 18 months is a shift to work from home, right? So we know that new industries are definitely starting to look at OKRs as a way of future-proofing their business and obviously making them more resilient to global change. So what industries are you starting to see break into the OKR marketplace in 2021?
That's an interesting question. Our clientele has always been really diverse. So I can't say that we've seen a really big difference in the last year, right? We work with some large global companies, some really small nonprofits, some large nonprofits, some startups, some scale-ups. We work in services, B2B, B2C, government, worked with the military. Like it's such a fascinating thing. It's actually one of the things I love most about my job, is that I get to interact with all sorts of different organizations. And what I feel like we do is combine forces. We could come in with a lot of expertise about OKRs, and then they have a ton of expertise about their own organization. And it can't be one coming on top of the other. There has to be this integration, which is a really fun process.
It sure is. It sure is. Meeting of the minds, right?
Yeah.
I once again, I can't thank you enough for taking the time, Gracie. I'm such a fan of your and Dan's work and enjoy every single time I get to chat with you. Not only is it enjoyable and engaging, I learned stuff. And being new to this, I think that's one of the biggest challenges is just continually being open to educate yourself, learn. I know I can't wait to get Dan's book, Start Less, Finish More, because I have finished John Doerr's book, so I am definitely drinking the OKR Kool-Aid. So I'm definitely ready for the harder cocktail. And hopefully Dan's book will do that for me. So I can't wait to read it. Gracie, I can't thank you enough for your time and all the work you do with not just our company but with our clients as well at Agile Strategies. Everybody, thank you
Really
again.
fun.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. And thanks everybody for joining. We are going to be sending out a live recording of this on Monday to everyone who took the time to register and join us live. Thank you, everybody. Have an enjoyable Thursday. And please reach out with any questions. We'd be happy to help. Gracie, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey.
Bye-bye.